Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Timothy Lee. I'm a research analyst at Red Cloud Securities. I'm delighted to host a Red Cloud webinar on gold exploration today. We will hear from Simon Dyakowski, President and CEO of Aztec Minerals Corp. During today's webinar, he will provide an overview and outlook, and then we will take questions. You can type your questions into the chat box at any time, and we will get to as many as we can. Before we kick things off, first we need to discuss some fine print during this Aztec webinar. Forward-looking statements may be made. I would direct listeners to the company's forward-looking statements disclosure outlined on page 2 of the Aztec corporate presentation, and that can be found on the company's website, aztecminerals.com. For Red Cloud Securities, Inc., I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only. It should not be considered a solicitation or recommendation to buy or sell securities. We note that this call does not consider the particular situation or needs of individual investors, and participants should rely on their own investigation and seek their own professional advice before investing. Please see our most recent research located on the Red Cloud website for specific disclosures pertaining to Aztec. So we have Aztec presenting today. The company has two strong projects, a porphyry gold-copper project in Mexico and a past-producing gold-silver project in Arizona. Both projects have near-surface oxide mineralization that's been demonstrated through drilling, and they also both appear to have potentially deeper exploration potential. With that, I now turn it over to Simon to update our audience on the company.
Well, thank you for the kind introduction, Timothy, and that was a great intro to our two projects. Aztec is focused on these two projects in tandem. They are emerging discoveries. We consider them to be emerging discoveries with basically the pre-delineation with significant upside on both, not only on the shallow oxide targets at each, but also at depth. In the case of our Cervantes project in Sonora, there is a significant porphyry copper gold potential at depth. And at the Tombstone Silver District in southeastern Arizona, there is significant potential polymetallic sulfide CRD mineralization potential at depth as well. We've already addressed the forward-looking statements, so you've been warned by Timothy and myself on that. Please be aware of this statement. As an overview of the company, so we are focused on discovery. Although we've made discoveries at each of our projects, we have not found the limits of the mineralization, so we're still focused on discovery as we advance them. The company is led by an experienced management and board. Many of our board members have been involved all the way through the mining cycle, from discovery through development to sale and operation of mines. We are focused on what we consider to be mining-friendly jurisdictions. We own 100% of the Cervantes porphyry gold copper project in Sonora, Mexico, and we own a 75% joint venture interest in the Tombstone oxide gold, silver, and CRD project in Arizona. Just a quick highlight of both projects. So at Cervantes, we have our 2023 exploration program underway. This was broken into two parts. Earlier this year, we spent about 4 months in the field proving up some additional drill targets that we think will hopefully expand on the discovery that we made in 2017-18 and 2022 drilling. And we today announced that drills have mobilized to site for a follow-up round of RC drilling, mainly focused around expanding the California zone oxide gold mineralization. There we've drilled 10,500 meters over 54 holes, and we'll be adding to that tally over the next 3 months through the end of 2024. Last year was a particularly big year of drilling, over 5,000 meters with 37 holes drilled in an RC reverse circulation and an oriented core drilling program. And the key highlight on this project is that most holes have intersected oxide gold mineralization from surface. The highlight hole returned 137 meters, averaging 1.49 grams per ton gold. Our second project, this is the emerging gold-silver discovery at the past-producing contention open pit at the Tombstone project in Arizona. We've recently wrapped up a 7-hole core drilling program in the contention open pit zone at this project. Previously, we drilled 5,700 meters in RC programs in 2020 and 2021. And most holes in this program have intersected significant oxide gold silver mineralization, with intersections up to 32 meters averaging 6.28 grams per ton gold equivalent, as well as 65.5 meters of 3.39 grams per ton gold equivalent. And our most recent hole of the core drilling program, hole TC2301, at depth intersected bonanza grade silver of 3,477 grams per ton silver over 1.5 meters within a broader zone of 7.6 meters that averaged over 730 grams per ton silver. And as mentioned, we have a deeper CRD silver, lead, zinc polymetallic target at depth. This is indicated through historic drilling and geophysics that we have yet to drill test and are working up the case to drill in the future. A little note on our strategy and why we think investors should take a hard look at companies like Aztec that have emerging discoveries under their belts. So major mining companies, they require large ore bodies, ore deposits to sustain their business. But they've kind of gotten out of the exploration game over the past few decades, and typically now you'll see majors rely on M&A to replenish those ore reserves. So they download the risk to the junior companies to take on the risk of risking capital and exploring to find discoveries. And then when the discoveries are made, you can have very large premiums paid by the bigger companies to acquire them. So juniors now dominate the exploration sector, and most of the expertise in making these discoveries resides in that junior exploration sector. And it's an asymmetric payoff when it works out, given that there are so few discoveries that are successfully made and taken through to acquisition. Why are we focused on North America? So in a subsequent slide, I'll highlight exactly where our projects are, but we view North America, the totality of it is really the best area in the world for exploration. If you look at the combination of low political risk, established rule of law, reasonable taxes, well-developed infrastructure, and still strong potential to discover more mineral, North America is a very favorable place to be focused on. And why Aztec Minerals? Why should investors take a look at Aztec Minerals and consider taking a position? Well, we have a management board that's well experienced with a proven track record of creating shareholder value. We have an attractive valuation of today less than $20 million market cap for 2 discoveries. 40% of our shares are closely held. We have 2 highly prospective projects that have had discoveries made on them already, are still being expanded, and have significant upside potential in those mining favorable jurisdictions of Sonora and Arizona. We're following up on our recent gold discovery at Cervantes. It's wide open for expansion, and the drill starts turning in a couple of weeks. We've recently drilled high-grade gold, silver, oxide mineralization at Tombstone, and we are working up new targets to drill there next year. And perhaps most importantly, why now? Well, now is the time, because the gold price has turned. We have been hovering around 1950, dipped down to the low 1800s last week, but we're up clearly about $100. The cycle is turning for gold. There's a lot of geopolitical risk in the world. There is financial risk creeping in. This is the time when the gold cycle gets underway. And once it's underway, the majors will be hungry to make deals. A note on our capital structure. We currently have just under 102 million shares outstanding, 7.5 million options, 20.2 million warrants. I'll note that approximately 6 million of those warrants will be rolling off over the next 2 months. 129.3 million fully diluted shares that will be reduced over the coming months. Insiders own 15% of the company. There's a closely held group aside from the insiders that own just under 30%. We have about $1 million in working capital, and we're trading at a valuation of around $18.8 million today. This is a steep discount to where we were trading when we were last drilling. Just looking at our share price performance here, our last round of drilling at Cervantes occurred last October through to December. Our share price responded well. At Tombstone, we were drilling between February and April. On the results, our share price responded well. It's been a very slow summer in the exploration sector. Unfortunately, Aztec has been no different than the sector in this last 6 months, but we now have raised money recently at quite a high premium to where we're trading at now at 22.5 cents. And that money is going into the ground. You're going to start seeing results, drill results over the next 2 to 3 months from that program, and a good opportunity potentially for our shares to become re-rated. Notable shareholders, this is a very important part of the Aztec story. On our discovery at Cervantes in our drilling in 2022, we did receive a strategic investment from Alamos Gold. Alamos Gold operates the Mulatos district, a very well-known open pit gold heap leach mine about 40 kilometers from us in Sonora, Mexico. They are now our largest shareholder. Alongside them, some institutional investors have joined our roster over the last year, Miramacan Capital and the EMA GARP Fund, well-known investors in the gold space, particularly for heap leach potential projects. In terms of our comps, we're steeply discounted to other recent discoveries, pre-production and post-discovery plays in Mexico and the Southwest USA. So good value from that perspective as well. Management director, so myself, I come from a capital markets background, been involved in funding and executing on drill programs for the last 6 years. Prior to that, on the capital markets side at Solomon Partners Lead and the Bank of Tokyo of Mitsubishi. On the exploration side, David Heil is our VPX, about 40 years experience in the industry, ex-Southern Peru Copper. He's had his hand in the discovery and evaluation of 30 million ounces of gold, 25 million tons of copper, with a particular focus in the Americas. Mark Rebliati is on our board. He's the chairman of our technical committee. He was recently inducted into the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame, owing to his significant role in a number of porphyry discoveries for the Hunter Dickinson Group. Pat Veris, another well-known geologist on our board, formerly the chairman of Western Potash. So a strong team of geologists and financial partners to lead us forward. Our project locations. We're focused in the Americas, but we're focused in a very particular part of the Americas, being southeastern Arizona and eastern Sonora State in Mexico. So we're about a 6-hour drive between each of our projects. We have a base of operations out of Hermosillo in Sonora State. The Cervantes project is surrounded by a number of Canadian owned and operated gold mines, including most notably the Mulatos district, which belongs to our largest shareholder, Alamos Gold. Just to the west of them, Agnico Eagle operates the La India project. This project was acquired in a transaction in 2011. They acquired about 1 million ounces of leachable gold in an M&A takeout of Grade Resources for $275 million in cash. So this was a large precedent transaction in the area, and it demonstrates, what can happen with exploration success in this part of the world. Minera Alamos, Santana, this is a well-known production story that has outperformed a number of its gold peers over the past couple of years. Very strong operational group there. They're just to our south, about 50 kilometers away. Osisko owns the San Antonio project to our west, and the La Colorada mine owned by Argonaut is a little further west. So a lot of familiar neighbors in this part of the neighborhood. Our project is about 3,600 hectares. We've identified on it 11 separate porphyry copper gold targets along 2 north-northeast striking trends. So we've highlighted those on this slide. What I'll say here is there's huge exploration upside as we get to the other targets, but we are focused right now on the California zone. This has seen the bulk of the drilling. It's towards the north central part of our property. We've drilled about 55 holes on this target, and it's still wide open to expand. This is oxide gold at the moment, from surface down to about 125 meters, with, we believe, significant copper gold upside in the sulfides at depth. Zooming in a little bit on our California zone current drilling plan. So we mobilized equipment today to go up and start drilling over the next couple of weeks. We'll keep the market updated as to our progress there. But what we're doing is we're expanding on the footprint that we've drilled over the past 2 drill campaigns. We had a very successful campaign in 2022. In fact, 2 successful campaigns where we took an initial basic fence or a straight line of drill holes along an east-west trend of about 1 kilometer in strike. And we stepped off 50 to 70 meters, both north and south, in 2 parallel fences. And as you can see from this plan map, we hit oxide gold in virtually every single hole that was completed alongside that initial drill pattern. So this really added significant width to the zone. We see no indications yet that it's cut off in any of the compass directions. Therefore, we are going in right now and expanding on this pattern with the orange pentagons that you see on this plan map. So about 10 to 14 holes will go in over the next couple of months. And subject to these results, we will be in a position to continue to expand, we think. It's a good bite size of a project for us, about $500,000 budget, and it should give us additional strike length and significantly more width to this zone. And you'll notice on this topographical map, we're right along a ridge line. So in terms of potential mining down the road, you're looking at a project that has potentially a very low stripping ratio, which is a key factor for the success of being able to fund and operate a heap leach gold mine in this part of the world. So a lot of good things going for us here. There's a very much a higher grade core to this project right along the top of the ridgeline. So again, you are not looking to remove much overburden to access the highest grades with the quickest payback. And we see good upside in continuing to drill. There seems to be a northwest dip to the entire structure here. So we see good upside in drilling across what is Noroeste and the Valle Norte zone and up to our next nearest drill target to the California zone, known as California Norte. We believe there's a good chance that these 2 zones might connect and eventually give us perhaps a square kilometer in this entire zone. And this is absent of making any discoveries at depth. So a lot of excitement here for us to come in, continue to drill, and prove to the market, why we really like this project, and continue to build up that case to drill deeper for the bigger porphyry copper gold signature that we believe is trending towards the north. Just a cross section to put in another dimension what I was describing. So we plan to be drilling through this ridge line another 70 meters to the south, 60 meters to the north. So getting quite a bit more area of influence into our geological model. This is a 2-stage program. We had this permitted back in June. So for those that have questions about the reform of the mining laws in Mexico, I will note that we were awarded our exploration permit after the new laws came into effect. So we're in an area of the country where there is not any opposition to our project. It's quite remote. All of the private land around us is owned by ranchers. We have service access agreements in place with all the ranchers. There is no real competing use for water in this area. We're not near an ejido, so it's a good place to be, out of sight, out of mind. So when we went for our drill permit, there wasn't much in terms of pushback on what we're proposing to do. So we did permit a 2-stage program, 4,200 meters, 28 holes. We're going to start with half of that now, get the results in, and hopefully get going again in the first quarter to complete the program, subject to the results of the first stage of drilling. And as mentioned in my opening remarks, the primary objective of this program is to continue to define the open pit heap leach gold potential of this porphyry oxide cap at the California zone, and do some surface work while we're at it to prove out our deeper targets as well. This is a cross-section view of the extent of the oxide mineralization. So you can see it runs along the ridgeline down to about 125 meters, sometimes to 150 meters. So there's a good band of oxide mineralization and a big sulfide story at depth as well. Here's our highlight reel of results. So over the past 3 drilling campaigns, Virtually every hole is hit 100 plus meters of better than 0.4 grams gold, but our top 10 here is much better than that. So headlined by hole 5 in 2022, 137 meters of 1.49 grams per ton gold. Hole 4 hit 165 meters of 1 grams per ton gold. Hole 12, 152 meters of 0.87 grams per ton gold, and down the list we go. So very, very strong results. When we think we'll continue to hit results like this as we drill more. We've only put 50 holes into this project, and we've already covered a lot of ground. So in terms of sort of bang for buck, if you want to look at that way, for cost to discover, this is just given the shallow nature of the mineralization, it's quite an efficient property to work on. $500,000 in drilling, while a relatively small budget, does cover a lot of ground for us. So we're excited to continue to advance this, even in a bit of a dip in the market over the past year or so. Metallurgically, we have done 2 rounds of bottle roll tests. We've seen excellent recoveries from the 7 holes that we've tested. The oxide groups recover 85 to 88% of the gold. Even the sulfide group recovered about 50% of the gold. So this is something that will require further and more advanced study, but to date, the metallurgical recoveries have been quite strong. So summary of this project before I move on to Tombstone. So we're now 100% owners of this project. A note on this, for those that have followed the company for the past few years, you might recall that we were 65% owners of this project until about a year ago. What changed was the results led to the investment by Alamos Gold, and at that time we made a deal after Alamos bought 10% of our shares. We then made a deal with our previous joint venture partners and acquired their minority interest by issuing them some stock, about 10 million shares. So we now own 100%, which is huge. It took a little bit of dilution to get there, but from my perspective and from a lot of market feedback, the joint venture was holding us back a little bit. So that's out of the way now, and about a year out of the way. So something to highlight. The property, it's well located. We're only about 10 kilometers near the closest power line. So although we're remote up in the mountains, there is power nearby. There's water wells on site. There's 2 roads accessing the property. We have multiple additional targets to test. We have had great success, obviously, on the California zone. That seems to be converging with the California Norte target. So quite a bit of low-hanging fruit upside just in infilling along this arroyo here that we're looking at, and then getting towards some of those other strong targets and eventually drilling deeper into the big sulfide anomaly at depth. 54 holes have been drilled, 10,500 meters over 3 programs. We're going to be adding to that over the next 3 months, and getting closer to either an initial resource or further discovery. Excellent metallurgical recovery so far, and again, this is wide open at depth and in all compass directions. There have been a couple of questions that have come in. So I'll just address a couple of them as they are relevant to Cervantes. So the one question is, does Alamos provide any technical input, or are they just passive shareholders? So that's a great question, and they provide a significant amount of technical input. We have a quarterly technical call with their top geologists, and they've been very helpful in helping guide us along here. Another question that came in based on Cervantes. So what sort of results will you be looking for from the first phase of drilling to commence the second phase of drilling? Well, really, the second phase of drilling will be based on areas where, if we've hit the limits of mineralization, perhaps in one direction, we won't focus in on that one. So it'll help us move further into the arroyo north of the California zone. I would say it's more really to refine the follow-up drill targets and decide perhaps where we might need to infill a little bit for the geological model. we do expect that we should have some good success on this program, just given what we've already seen. So I don't think it's going to have any groundbreaking impact on the magnitude of the follow-up drilling, but more so on pinpointing exactly where we should be focusing more of the meterage. So thank you for those questions on Cervantes. Tombstone. So I want to spend a few minutes on Tombstone. This isn't by any means something that's parked. It's just something that we have drilled recently and now need to interpret the results from before we go back in for further drilling next year. So an introduction to Tombstone. So we consider this to be an open pit oxide gold silver target, obviously because it was subject to open pit heap leach mining, and as recently as the late 80s. But there's very strong underground CRD or carbonate replacement deposit style mineralization potential at depth. The reason that we really like this CRD target is given the proximity to Taylor Hermosa, which was a famous discovery made in 2015 by Arizona Mining. They acquired the small historic Hermosa Silver District 40 miles to our south, to our southwest, about 10, 15 years ago, and decided to drill a little bit deeper below that silver project, that silver deposit, which was located a little bit shallower to where they made the ultimate discovery of what's now known as the Taylor deposit. And they found the Taylor Deeps by drilling 1.1 kilometers below that Hermosa Silver District, and quickly attracted major investment from South 32 Mining, and ultimately were acquired by them in just 3 short years for almost $2 billion Canadian. One of the largest zinc primary deposits discovered over the past few decades. So we are in a very similar geological setting, where we're in what is known as Bisbee Group sediments. That's where the veins and the mantos of the silver and gold mineralization are hosted near surface. And then there's about a 6,000 foot limestone horizon below that, where we have some very interesting historic deep drill results that we plan to follow up on next year. So quick look at the property map. What we've done here is outline the main pit zone in yellow. So this has been the focus of our drilling. So, I mentioned the deep CRD target. We haven't drilled that yet. We have one historic drill hole that did reach that target depth. We didn't drill it. It was drilled by Santa Fe Mining in 1989, returned at 600 meters depth. So bear in mind, Taylor Hermosa, the big discovery there, was made at over a kilometer depth. We've got indications that at half of that depth that we've got some potentially similar style of grade, 7 meters of almost 10% metal content. I'll get into the highlights of that in a couple of slides, but that's the exploration upside at depth. But we focused in on the shallow, the oxide gold. That's a bit of a theme for us at Aztec, is to drill the low hanging fruit first, build up a base of value in this, call it a bear market. Lower cost programs where we're getting looking like we're getting significant tonnages of really good grades of potentially leachable material in the case of Cervantes, and in the case of Tombstone already has been leached in previous open pit mining. So we've drilled in this yellow boundary, about 50 drill holes. We'll get into the highlights there, but in that drilling, we've greatly expanded our target zone down to the south, to the east, and 2 targets to the west. So this still is wide open in the shallow aspects of the project, and we have a deep target at depth. So zooming in a little bit on our open pit oxide target, our drilling has confirmed extensive shallow oxidized gold silver mineralization below and around this historic contention pit. Now, this pit was dug about 900 meters, almost a kilometer in strike, north-south, and down to a maximum depth of about 60 to 80 meters. So it's shallow. And the reason that we focused in on this open pit target was because in the Western US, your typical heap leach gold project will average a grade of, let's say, a half gram, 0.4 to 0.6. Now, our results in the bottom and to the sides of this pit were much higher than that in comparison. This pit, the contention open pit, operated in the late 80s at a much lower metal price environment. And the recoveries were good for their era. They were only leaching for a very short cycle and recovering 75% of the gold and roughly 60% of the silver with only minor crushing. So we feel that these are aspects of the project that could be improved on going forward. There's high grade remaining in many areas of this project. Just even in the pit walls, we've had grab samples that have come in over 3,000 grams silver and over 20 grams gold. And now we're starting to see that in some of our deeper drilling as well. Our drilling over the past 3 years has outlined a bulk tonnage gold silver zone of 900 meters in length and widths up to 300 meters and depths of 200 meters. This is a significant area that we've started to drill off. We've only gone in with core drilling recently, and our first core hole of this year returned for the first time the highest grades of silver that we've seen on the project. Hole 1 intersected bonanza grade silver, over 100-ounce silver over 1.5 meters, and a wider zone of 7.6 meters of over 700 grams silver. So very exciting results that got the market excited when we were drilling there. We're just zooming in here on this slide a little bit on our plan map so you can see the red colors and traces were the focus of our RC or reverse circulation drilling. Now, we did follow that up with core drilling this year. This was designed to step down, so to go a little bit deeper than we'd been able to drill in hole 1. In particular than with the previous RC drilling, which had a little bit of trouble at the water table, to step out to the east and then to the west in hole 2. And so we were successful in our efforts to step out in those directions. And also we filled in a big gap here of several hundred meters between the Grand Central zone and the main pit zone. And what this hole 6 here demonstrated is that these two zones have great continuity between them. So there is really no reason for us to think that the mineralization just ends at Grand Central. It could continue on to the south. So the highlight hole, we've obviously covered off the bonanza grade silver there, but all the holes had, multiple broad zones of high grade silver and gold in oxides in them. And to date in our drilling, every single one of the 51 holes that we put in has intersected shallow oxidized gold silver mineralization over substantial widths. And our drilling was successful in expanding the known gold silver mineralization. This is our top 10 highlight reel for the contention zone of the Tombstone project. This is very significant. I mean, if you look at these top 10 holes, this is something that if you stack it up to some of the other companies exploring in the southwest of the U.S. or northwest of Mexico, these are some of the strongest set of results that you'll see over the past few years. 65.5 meters in hole 22 a couple of years ago, averaging 2.44 grams per ton gold and 66.56 grams per ton silver. Very strong result over a broad width. Hole 10. In 2021, 96 meters of 2.2 grams per ton gold equivalent, just looking at the gold and silver. Hole 1 this year, 125 meters averaging 1.63 grams per ton gold equivalent. Hole 5 this year, 36 meters of over 5 grams gold equivalent. So these are all shallow, broad zones of oxide gold silver mineralization, just a little bit below where the old timers in the 80s stopped mining. Looking at on a long section on this side, you can see that we have really only scratched the surface. We've drilled down to the water table in most of the holes, and most recently we have been able to drill a little bit deeper with the core holes, but you can see there's significant upside at depth. There's significant upside in filling in between the main central zone here and the southern zone of the Grand Central pit. And in the previous slide, we demonstrated our views on how we could step out in the west, east, and southerly direction. So there's big upside here, we believe, simply on the shallow oxide drilling. And those grades are compelling if you are considering open pit heap leaching. Now, I just realized I didn't mention this in my opening remarks. This project is on private ground. So while it's in a 75-25 joint venture, I'll just skip back a couple slides and show that this is patented mining claims. And so in the States, there's basically 3 categories of land for mineral exploration. There's Forest Service land, there's Bureau of Land Management land. So those are federal lands. And then you have private land. And so we have private patents on most of this project and all of the project that is of geological interest. So the permitting timelines and hurdles for mining projects in Arizona on private land are night and day compared to those on federal land. It's basically removing a full layer of bureaucracy, and it's a very advantageous situation from a risk perspective for us to be located on private land. Just to give it a tangible example of that, our drill permitting process in Mexico, which is pretty quick, took about 6 weeks. Our drill permitting process on private land in Arizona took about 1 day. It's simply a filing with the county. So it's very friendly towards exploration. It's a very mining friendly area of southeastern Arizona. And that I think needs to be highlighted for potential and existing investors. Just a reminder that element of risk, that's inherent in all mining and exploration projects is, in our view, greatly reduced by virtue of being on private land. We looked on long section and we could see the 900 meters of strike and how we believe that it extends to the south. Well, here's just a cross section view of the middle of the pit, and you can see how this mineralization is situated very, very shallow to the bottom of the pit. Within, in the case of hole 22, it starts within 20 meters of the bottom of the pit, and it's situated just under the west bench. So this is a very, very good setup for us here. You can see the width here, about 200 meters across on section M, open east and west at this point and at depth. So lots of upside here for us. And just a note on the model here and how we're looking at this shallow oxide target. So this is in the Bisbee group sediments. What we've done here is we've overlain a few different things. So the orange area is the area that we were able to test with our RC program. The yellow area here represents what we've been able to test with deeper drilling with Corp. And what we're trying to show here is that we've only just started to touch the water table, which is about 200 meters in depth. And the core drilling was able to get us through that water table. And as we were transitioning from sediments to the blue and white limestone levels, that's where we saw the secondary enrichment and the high grades of silver. So we've really only had one drill hole that has been able to test that. That's a really compelling target to find more high grade silver. Now notice this overlay of mine workings. Now this is important. Tombstone, way back before the open pit heap leach mining, saw very significant for its day underground mining. And they were down 1,000 feet or 10 levels back around 1905 to 1915 in the contention mine. And this was a 4-compartment shaft with a big water pumping operation where they were lowering the district water table by about 400 feet in order to go and explore and access some of the enriched silver grades at depth. So that's what we saw in our first drill hole in 2023, was that potential for enriched silver grades at depth. And it bodes well for our deeper targets going forward. Now, this ultimately wasn't fully mined out because the water pumping operation had several failures in the early 1910s. And by the time of the First World War, there wasn't funding to keep it being rebuilt. And so it sat dormant largely until the 1980s when the shallow pit was put into production over a period of about 8 years in the 1980s. So, really a lot of the legwork has been done for us in terms of developing the model. And so we've put it here in an idealized section just to be able to talk through it a little bit easier. Now, this is the potential for a CRD discovery. Now, obviously, this isn't our share price chart. This is the Arizona mining chart, but But these guys in 2015 started out at 25 cents a share, and they were bought for $6 a share in 3 years on the back of making and advancing the CRD discovery at the Hermosa Silver District. This was just a huge win during another challenging time in the market. Zooming in a little bit on why we think we've got a similar target on our property. Well, what we're looking at here is obviously the pit that we've been drilling in and having the great shallow results, but what's overlain on the right hand of the screen is the geophysical anomaly that we've uncovered way below the bottom of the pit. So we're looking here at a 600-meter depth slice, and these are two not chargeability rather, but they're resistivity lows, which indicate conductive bodies at depth. And there's been no drilling into these bodies whatsoever. Now, there has been deep drilling around them, and it's a little bit difficult to see on my presentation here, but there are a number of drill holes on the edge of our property that went in and hit some narrower widths of sulfide mineralization. But because of the recent open pit mining at the time, so these holes were drilled in the late 80s, right at the time that this open pit mine was shutting down due to low gold prices. So this operator, Santa Fe Mining, they shied away a little bit from the fresh disturbance, so they didn't drill test under the mine, which is curious because that to us is clearly the the dominant heat source for what drove the near surface mineralization. They did get one hole in though, and that's hole T8 just under the north end of the pit. And the result of that hole we can see on this slide was 7.16 meters of 6.5% lead, 2.6% zinc, 0.6 copper, 32 grams silver. And this is at about 600 meters deep, which happens to be around the same depth of these two anomalies. So what we're doing in our data analysis on Tombstone right now is working through some deeper targets to better understand this potential mineralization a little bit south of that hole T8. So we believe that this project does have that Taylor CRD potential, and we're advancing both of these targets concurrently with the goal of drilling these later next year. And then looking here at a pseudo section of that conductive body at depth, that's about 600 meters right underneath the contention pit. So you can see there's a fairly large conductor that we would love to drill test there next year. So the highlights on Tombstone, we're operators of a 75-25 joint venture on the property. It's well located. It's on private land. There's good road access. There's all the infrastructure needed right there, full services, including water and power. We own a water well right on site, so that's not an issue. The historic Silver District produced 32 million ounces between 1878 and 1940. Half of that production came from that contention mine down 1,000 feet, which is right underneath the open pit that we've been working in. Our 2020 to 2023 drill programs intersected extensive gold silver mineralization along 900 meters of strike. We have multiple prospective targets to follow up on, which we plan to do over 2024. Our recent milestones and next steps. So over the past year and a half, we've raised $6 million in 3 financings, one at 30 cents, one at 25, and one at 22.5 cents, which recently closed. We're funded for our upcoming drilling at Cervantes. And we recently acquired the remaining 35% of that project. So we now have 100% of that project, which is a big milestone for us back last July 2022. Tombstone, we've recently had a successful core drilling program, successfully intersecting deeper gold and silver oxide mineralization and expanding that footprint. Q1 of next year, we're working up our targets for the next round of drilling, both to expand the Bisbee group, the shallow oxide mineralization that we've had success in so far, and also working up the case to drill for that deeper CRD silver lead zinc target. At Cervantes, we have mobilized drills today for the upcoming drill program for the 4th quarter of 2023. So we'll have lots of news and results coming out from that over the rest of the quarter and into the new year. That's based off of a very comprehensive exploration program that we undertook in the first half of the year. And, it's been a long time coming, about 6 months to get this off the ground, but we're drilling again. And that has been a share price catalyst for us over the past couple of years. So just in closing, why should investors be interested in Aztec? Well, again, management's key. We have a team behind us that has had experience in doing what we're doing, making discoveries, operating mines, and selling companies. The valuation's attractive, about a 50% discount to where we were trading on our last drill results back in May. So, really, hopefully it doesn't get any cheaper than this, but it's a rock bottom valuation. We have good shareholders, about 40% are closely held, and Alamos Gold is our largest shareholder, keenly watching what we're finding at Cervantes. They've been in the last 3 financings with us. We own 100% of Cervantes, one of our prospective projects, and 75% of Tombstone. We have an emerging discovery at each, both with significant upside in both the shallow and deeper aspects of the drilling. And that CRD target at Tombstone could potentially be another game changer for us. So that is my formal presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that might come up now.
Great. Thank you very much, Simon, for the informative presentation. We'll now start the Q&A portion of the webinar. A reminder to everyone on the line that you can type your questions into the chat box at any time. And we do already have a few questions. Now, Simon had addressed a couple of them during the presentation, but I think one that's kind of interesting, and maybe I would back up and ask, thinking about the business model here, would you look to advance through to production, or would you look to advance the projects to a certain point and potentially sell to a producer?
Yeah, so the decision on how to advance the projects is really driven by the exploration success. So until we find the limits of the mineralization on, both of these projects, we're still in full discovery mode. But, obviously, as we get further down the path on the oxide cap at Cervantes, for example, we do plan to advance metallurgical testing next year, advanced metallurgical testing and resource estimation. So, those 2 aspects of the project are really the key building blocks to further economic study, be it a PEA or PFS. So we're building up the blocks that could potentially feed into those third-party reports. But, really, 90% of our focus is on discovery and exploration at this moment in time.
Great. And there was one interesting question that came in, might be a little speculative, for you, but an interesting one. When majors start buying, what do you think their priorities will be? Projects that are significantly de-risked, that may have economic studies in place, or projects with early stage discoveries?
Well, that's a good question. I think that it really depends on the business model of the miner. So, if it's a company that is, comfortable with, let's say, heap leach operations that, tend to be lower CapEx, lower cost, I think they will probably focus in on earlier stage things, just because they're a little simpler to understand, and I think the ramifications of CapEx estimation they're just less. If you're looking at I'm just making up a number, about $100 million build versus a $500 million build, there's a little bit more room for error, and they can probably get involved a little bit earlier. So I think it really depends on the business model of the acquiring company. And then, of course, you saw with Great Bear and Kinross, if there's a world-class discovery, then, oftentimes they'll come in before you get too far into the feasibility or pre-feas part of the project. So we're lucky because I think our projects are relatively simple to understand in terms of the risks, and we don't foresee getting into estimations of any kind of huge CapEx numbers, just given the oxide leachable nature of the mineralization that we've drilled off to date.
Great. Another question that came in here, is there a timeline for a maiden resource estimate at Cervantes?
Yeah, the timeline is really going to be driven by the results of the drilling. We have, as mentioned in the presentation, we'll have probably over 12,000 meters of drilling. which we think would be enough for potentially an initial resource estimate next year. But it really depends on if we keep hitting on these drill holes. If we still haven't even come close to the margins, then I don't know if it would exactly make sense to launch into one. But with 12,000 meters of data, we'd have a good start, which would be, I think, compared to other projects, very minimal drilling compared to some projects that are hosted deeper, might be more of an underground style of deposit. So it's a good position to be in. We could. But we're hopeful that we're going to just keep expanding on this thing.
Great. And then obviously you're at the drilling stage, but how far out are you from an initial economic study?
Well, we haven't commissioned one, so we can't really give any timelines out on an economic study. But generally, the timeline, could be for a project like this, probably, maybe about a year out. You need to have a resource first, and then the biggest part of it would be some column testing for the heap leach economics at Cervantes, for example. So call it about a year out.
Okay. And one question that's always popular, how much cash does the company have, and how far will that get you with your current plans?
Yeah, we have got $1 million in working capital, and it's half of that is funding our upcoming drilling at Cervantes. It's about a $500,000 program, so that's fully funded, and our G&A is funded as well. So we're in good shape that way.
Great. And maybe just to review, obviously you had mentioned in one of the final slides there, but what are some key milestones and news items we might expect from Aztec over the coming weeks and months?
Yeah, well, certainly over the coming weeks, the big one will be when the drill actually starts. I guess not turning, but starts pulverizing the rock and coming up with the chips. That's RC drilling. So we'll have an update out on that. We'll include some details on the specific targets at that point. And then, we've never been shy to put out news and keep our shareholders informed of how drilling's going. And then obviously the results will come out, and hopefully several batches over the later part of November and into January. So we'll have, I would characterize it as robust news flow starting really now with today's announcement that the drill's mobilized all the way into the first quarter.
Okay, great. Great. Well, I think that's all the questions we have. I'd like to thank Simon Dyakowski for presenting today. And thank you everyone on the line for tuning in. Just a reminder that Red Cloud Securities will be back tomorrow afternoon when our webinar, Thursday afternoon, when our webinar series continues with GoviX Uranium presenting at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.